So, someone does something to hurt your feelings. You bring it up because that's what mature adults do. And they hit you with the, girl, you too sensitive. Or, the past is the past. What is your problem? I want you to think about how that made you feel. These phrases may seem harmless, but I tell you, they can cause a lot of serious damage to our relationships. And personally, I want better for us. Talkticians, welcome and welcome back to my channel. My name is Tatiana. This is the channel where I teach you communication strategies to help you master conflict resolution. Today, we're unpacking common hurtful phrases. I'm going to talk about why they're so harmful, and I'm going to tell you what to say instead to build and not break connection. Okay, so first we have to get into the why. Why do people say things like, you're too sensitive, or the past is in the past? These phrases usually show up when a person feels shame. And shame is very heavy and it is very uncomfortable to deal with. When someone says to us, hey, you've hurt me, we have a choice. We have a choice to do the work and try to understand where they're coming from, or we can blame. And to be quite honest, it's just easier to blame. Okay, because doing the work means that you have to be self reflective. You have to admit that you're not so perfect and something that you did or said actually hurt another person. And that doesn't make anybody feel good, right? Another reason why people say these kinds of things is because they are doing it unconsciously. Like they've been doing it for so long, they don't even know that they're doing it. They don't know that it's a problem. For some people, depending on their background, how they grew up, this is what was modeled to them. This is how the people around them dealt with difficult conversations. So they're just going based off of what they learned. Now, does that take your pain away? Absolutely not. But the purpose of me explaining this is so that we have a little bit more context, once that we can be more patient with ourselves, but definitely be more patient with other people and give them some grace. All right, so let's get into some of these common phrases and how they impact the other person. You're overreacting, girl. It's not that deep. The impact is that it creates more self doubt in the other person. Now, we all deal with self doubt, but for me, I had to think about it. Do I want to be the person to add to that self doubt? And I don't. When we say things like you're overreacting or it's not that deep, when somebody comes to us and says, hey, you hurt me, it triggers self doubt. It triggers a lack of trust in themselves. And when we don't trust ourselves, we end up leaning on other people. And then that leaves us primed and ready for abuse. And if we're trying to be in healthy relationships, obviously that's not something that we want. So we have to learn a better way. These kinds of phrases are also very dismissive. And again, it shifts blame back to the other person. So we don't get the opportunity to actually resolve anything. So in order to keep our relationships intact, we could try saying, I see this is really affecting you. Can we talk about it some more? This is going to actually acknowledge the person's experience, and it leaves the space open for some conversation to actually happen. You can also say, help me understand what you're feeling right now. This is helpful because we have now taken on an attitude of curiosity. We're going to actually gain some information. This also disarms the other person because it lets us know that we care enough about them to hear them speak. Another common phrase that we use that's pretty harmful is you always or you never. Now, I'm guilty of this one myself. When we say things like that, it's sometimes an exaggeration or it's just flat out untrue. You wouldn't be in relationship, you wouldn't be in connection with this person if they always or if they never did ... They had to have done something positive at some point. It also can make the person feel like they're being attacked, which is then going to create defensiveness or withdrawal. So we can't see the pain that words cause, but it doesn't mean that the pain does not exist, right? So if somebody walked up to you and, God forbid, tried to stab you, you would block that or you would run away, right? I want you to think of words the same way. Words can be used as a weapon, and that defensiveness or that withdrawal that we see in people, that's a shield, that is protection. And I mean, we can go back and forth about how the defensive person just needs to be stronger, or how the person that actually said the message, is just grossly unskilled. We can do that all day. But at the end of it, both people need to be doing the work. One, to deliver the message peacefully, and two, to receive the message with courage. So in order for us to shift out of this violent dynamic, something that we can say instead of you always or you never, I notice when this happens, we tend to, and then whatever the action is, that's important. So that is an I statement. That kind of statement is going to help both of you recognize that there is a pattern happening without actually placing blame on the other person. You can also ask, can we talk about how we handle these moments? Keyword is we, right? So with that statement, It's a lot more collaborative than it is confrontational. And once again, tone is also very important. Choosing to use these statements are going to leave space for healthy conversation. Last but not least, I was just joking. The problem with this statement is that it invalidates the other person's feelings. It doesn't matter at this moment that you were just joking. You hurt somebody, and that needs to take precedence. When somebody comes to us and says, "Hey, you hurt me," and we say, "I was just joking," we're avoiding accountability. We're putting the blame once again back on the other person by basically saying, "You're being too sensitive." The interesting thing with this statement is that, they always say that there's always a little bit of truth to a lie or a little bit of truth to a joke. I definitely think that that applies here. So, right before you said whatever that joke was, be real with yourself. What was the emotion that you were feeling? Was it jealousy? Was it rejection? Was it anger? There was something that you were feeling before you said that inappropriate statement. I think it's also important to ask ourselves, if somebody made that joke about me, how would I feel? And maybe you don't have the same sensitivity about whatever that situation was, but maybe it was. I want you to think about it being like a soft spot. Think of something that's maybe sensitive to you. How would you feel if somebody cracked a joke about that? Probably not that good. So, what we can try saying instead of "I was just joking, my comment hurt you. I appreciate you telling me, and I am going to be more mindful next time." No excuses, just accountability. If intent is really important to you, like it is to me, then you can communicate that and just say, "I was trying to be funny, but I see that it didn't land that way. I apologize. I'll be more mindful of it next time." Simple. Conversation done. Just like that. Now nobody's feelings are hurt. You communicated, you've repaired, and we're good to go. So, what does it say about us if we use these kinds of phrases? All it is we have room to grow. We have room to grow in our emotional intelligence, like everybody. The important part is that you do what you need to do to grow in the emotional arena, because when we choose not to grow, there are real consequences. When we say these statements, we're choosing not to be reflective. We are choosing not to develop our self awareness. That means that we're not accepting new ideas, new perspectives, which means that we stay stuck in the same unhealthy cycles. When we use these statements, we miss the opportunity to actually practice skill in emotional regulation. We don't just become composed overnight. That's something that you have to work on. And what a great opportunity to do that when somebody confronts you and say, "Hey, you hurt me." Choosing not to grow means that we choose to be poor listeners. Poor listeners do not self-reflect. They argue for the sake of arguing. And it's really hard to be in a relationship with someone like that. Not to mention that when we do these things over and over and over again, we diminish trust in our relationships. And you cannot have a healthy relationship without that. So, the same way that we need physical safety, we need emotional safety as well. And when we say things like "you never," "you always," "I was just joking," it signals to the other person that we are not a safe space. Over time, the people who are on the receiving end of these statements end up shutting down, or they walk away from the relationship completely. And in that, both parties suffer. The whole reason I'm making this video is because if we can learn these skills, we can avoid that. We can avoid loneliness. We can avoid broken relationships if we just learn how to talk to people, especially in those moments when it matters most, when they're hurting. So I want us to grow as communicators, aim for trust, aim for closeness, and aim for healthy discussion. Replace those reactive phrases with some of the reflective ones that we talked about in this video. Even if you mess up, that's okay. We're human. We're all going to mess up. But be mindful, take responsibility, and when you make a mistake, apologize. If you communicate that you're trying to grow, the other person will understand. As my mother would always say, the power of life and death is in the tongue. Words matter. Words have power, so be sure to use that power wisely. Y'all know that we're here to learn and to build community, so y'all let me know. Have you ever been hit with any of these phrases, and how did it make you feel? Go ahead and drop those answers in the comments. Talkticians, until next time.